discussion on related party transactions. Just to quickly wrap it up based on what we discussed last time, so as to connect it with what we're going to do today. So last time we were talking about related party transactions, and we're saying the basically layers of approval of related party transactions consist of 3 layers: the audit committee, the board of directors, and the general meeting. And the sequence basically is that every related party transaction first comes to audit committee. Wherever the company is required to have an audit committee, it comes to audit committee first. It may or may not come to the board, but definitely will have to come to audit committee. What does the audit committee do? The audit committee sees whether the transaction is in ordinary course of business or and is arm's length. If the transaction is not reaching either of the 2 requirements of being in ordinary course of business or arm's length, in that case, the audit committee may just approve the transaction, and then the intervention of the board may not be required at all. If the transaction happens to be an ordinary course of business and arm's length transaction, the audit committee may just sanction the transaction itself and may not put it to the board at all. If the audit committee finds the transaction is not in ordinary course of business or is not arm's length, in that case, the transaction will have to move to the board. If the transaction is meeting, if the transaction is falling in one of the 7 transaction types listed in section 188. Assuming for a minute the transaction is one of the transactions not listed in section 188, and also when the audit committee comes to a conclusion that the transaction is not either ordinary course of business or arm's length. So I'll give an example. Section 188 lists 7 transactions. What are those 7 transactions? Sale or purchase of goods, sale or purchase of properties, underwriting contracts, agency contracts, appointment to an office or place of profit. Talks about leasing of properties. So it talks about 7 transaction types specifically listed in the section. If the transaction happens to be one of the transactions not listed in section 188, then what do we do? Then does it still have to go to the board? So the perspective is, okay, let's first think of what transactions may not be covered by section 188. What are the transactions which are not covered by section 188? Apparently, as you could see, financial transactions, for example, giving of loan, taking of loans, giving of guarantees, taking of guarantees, subscribing to shares or allotting shares. Purchase of shares is different. Subscribing to shares or allotment of shares apparently do not seem to be covered by section 188. So we say these are financial transactions. Section 188 does not have to cover financial transactions. There are separate sections. For example, 185 deals with loans, 186 deals with investments. So there might be other sections dealing with respective financial transactions. That is not the reason why section 188 should not cover. I don't see that's the reason why section 188 does not or should not capture it. Right? However, irrespective of what could be the reason, section 188 has not listed those items. Like giving of loans, taking of loans is not explicitly listed in section 188. Now the point I was saying is that let's say we have a particular loan and the transaction is put still before the audit committee, even if it's not one of the transactions listed in section 188, it still has to go to the audit committee. And the audit committee comes to a conclusion that they are not able to see the transaction as arm's length. For example, say the company is lending to another group entity, and the audit committee comes to a conclusion that the terms of the loan are not exactly arm's length. What could be the reasons because of which the terms of the loan are not arm's length? Non-arm's length nature of the loan may be because of several reasons. I'm getting a feedback from Nilesh that my voice is not reaching. Is that the case with everyone? Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me fine? Am I audible? A lot of people are saying it's fine. Nilesh, however, seems to have it. Okay, that's fine. Not everyone is to go and say yes. Dilesh, it might be probably a problem at your end. Kindly check that because everyone else is still saying that it's fine. So the point I was making is that let's say we are lending to a group company and the loan is not seen as arm's length loan by the audit committee. What could be the reasons why the loan is not arm's length? The reason for the audit committee to come to a conclusion that the loan is not arm's length could be several. I mean, the easy one to say is that, well, the rate of interest is not, and the rate of interest is not what one normally would expect. Let's say charging, undercharging rate of interest. That's one, I mean, very apparent reason. But there could be lots of other reasons. For example, I would say, well, had it been an arm's length transaction, I would not have given the loan at all. Because this entity is not a good credit and the entity will not qualify for my lending at all. If the transaction was arm's length, I would not have given the loan in the first place at all. Therefore, that is also a reason to say it's not arm's length, because on arm's length basis, I would not have selected the borrower at all. I wouldn't have lent my money at all. Not to speak of rate of interest, I wouldn't have lent at all had it been an arm's length proposition. But because it's not arm's length, it's a connected party transaction. So I'm decided to give a loan. But the audit committee says, well, we don't see this arm's length because on arm's length basis we would have lent. Or for, let's say, the security is not good, the rate of interest is not good, the tenure of repayment is not acceptable. So there might be hazard reasons for the audit committee to come to a conclusion that this is not an arm's length situation. In that case, what would happen? The transaction is not listed in section 188. It still has to come to audit committee because, as we said, reiterate what I said yesterday, that whenever there is an audit committee, every RPT, irrespective of whether it's ordinary course, non-ordinary course, listed in section 188 or whatever, it still has to come to the audit committee. So on what basis will the audit committee doesn't want to approve it because it's not arm's length. So what will happen to this transaction? Where will it go? Since the audit committee does not want to approve it, such a transaction should still go to the board. It's not going under section 188. It's going for the reason that the audit committee is not comfortable approving it. Audit committee consisting of independent director does not want to approve it. It's for the larger board. If the larger board still feels comfortable approving it, let them approve it. And if they also don't want to approve it, let them put the matter before general meeting. So the hierarchy of approvals is audit committee consisting of IDs, majorly IDs, may not approve it. It goes to larger board may still be comfortable, approve it. If the board is also not comfortable, mind you, even the board cannot approve things which are not arm's length. I would hold a view that something is not arm's length. I would find it unjustifiable for the board also to approve something. On what basis does the board approve something which is not arm's length? Admittedly, if the contract is non-arm's length, how does the board approve it? Because then the board is putting itself into a conflict of interest. The board itself is putting into a conflict situation if the board wants to approve something which is admittedly non-arm's length. I would have actually expected such cases to go to general meeting. So the point I was making is that section 188 has a defined list of items, but additionally items will still have to come to the board if the matter is such where the audit committee is not comfortable because the transaction is not arm's length or ordinary course of business. So we were discussing yesterday the hierarchy of approval, and we were saying in order to see the related party controls, we are confronted with the following terms. First, we are confronted with the party, and for deciding whether the party in question is related party or not. In case of listed entities, we are looking at definition of section 2/76 and clubbing it with the definition given in accounting standard, because we are moving through the regulation 23 of LODR over to the accounting standards, and we club that part as well. In case of listed entities, in order to see the meaning of the word transaction, any transfer of resources, obligations, or rendering or provision of services is a case of a transaction. And we were saying what is the meaning of related party. We had seen section 2/76, and we were seeing the provisions of accounting standard India's 24, assuming that's the applicable accounting standard for most listed entities anyway. Regulation, India's would have been applicable. So we were saying that this India's 24 has two parts: a person and an entity. And in case of a person, It talks about, in case of a person, it talks about the following classes of persons. The person has a control, the person has significant influence, and the person is member of KMP, key managerial personnel, which is the board of directors. And then it goes to say in case of entities, several situations. So situations in case of entities would be several, so as to say the following situations are, so we're talking about various situations under moving forward to situations which might be covered. So first part is, I have to refer back to meaning of promoter group because one of the clauses refers to promoter group as well. So now let's look at first clause 9b. It says in case of entity, the entity is related to a reporting entity if any of the following conditions are met. The entity is related to reporting entity. So we are going from the reporting entity and looking at that. Reporting entity is the entity which is reporting. So let's say my company is the reporting company, and I'm looking at the other entity if that other entity happens to be a related party or not. A parent, subsidiary or fellow subsidiary. My parent, my holding company, my subsidiary, and my fellow subsidiaries will all be related parties. I must quickly say here the word subsidiary includes fellow subsidiaries also, and likewise the word parent includes the ultimate parent. Irrespective of how many layers the parent is sitting at, the parent can be a parent sitting at any layer, it would still be a parent. You must note the very significant difference that Ind AS 24 refers to the word entity. Companies Act talks about holding company. So it refers to a company. Ind AS 24 is not referring to a company, in this case entity. So there are lots of situations where the entity in question is not a company at all, or not a body corporate either. The entity in question might be a trust, the entity in question might be an AIF. There are many situations where shareholding of a group is under the control of a family trust or under the control of, let's say, an alternative investment fund. So in those cases as well will still identify the controlling entity irrespective of the organizational form of the entity. So a parent, subsidiary or fellow subsidiary, irrespective of what is its organizational form, will still be a related party, and also no matter how many layers beyond the reporting entity is it situated at. It may be immediately above the company, immediately below the company, or might be several layers above or below the company. Irrespective of how many layers is it sitting at, it might be sitting at several layers above. So for example, in lots of foreign-owned companies, I might have a company in India, and the company might be controlled through several layers by, let's say, a company sitting in the US, or a company sitting somewhere in Europe. So each of the layers will still be related parties if the layers in question are having control at each stage. Or if the parent is sitting at some layers above, then the parent, irrespective of how many layers above is the parent sitting, it would still be a related party. Next part comes and says, one entity JV of another entity or an associate of another entity. And the one entity JV, other entity is an associate. I am, let's say, JV of some entity, I am a joint venture, and the other entity happens to be associate. Situation is such that there are two entities, one of which is jointly controlled, other one is significantly invested in. So there is a significant influence there. Those entities also, I will just have a graphical illustration of this also. As we go ahead, we can probably see the graphical illustrations as well, so as to grasp the meaning of each of these clauses. So first case we said holding company, subsidiary company, the group of holding and subsidiary companies, parent and subsidiary company. Second case talks about one entity being an associate, second entity being a joint venture. So we have two companies, one of which is associate. Associate meaning normally 20% or above. That's a presumption. That's a so-called rebuttable presumption. Other entity happens to be joint venture. Those two entities, that is, the associate and joint venture, are mutually related entities. Next comes a case where we're talking about the third clause, which says there are two JVs. Investor is common, two entities are JVs of the common investor. And then come 9B4, investor and investor associate in joint venture. So a significant investor in my company is a joint venture in another company. That also will be case covered by 9B4. 9B5 talks about employment benefit funds. I mean, for whatever reasons, accounting standards have taken employment benefit funds, employee benefit funds, also as related parties. It sounds very clear that these funds are actually, I mean, they meant for holding ESOPs or holding shares of companies, treasury funds or provident funds, etc. But if accounting standards have captured employee benefit funds also as related entities, because in global parlance, these funds have a lot of value. And these funds might be sitting with a lot of shareholding control. These funds may be sitting with a lot of money. So these funds are essentially belonging to the senior management of the company. So they've also been seen as related parties. It is not fitting with the structure of related parties in our country, but that's how international accounting standards are still viewed. 96, we're talking about a person referred to in 9A. Who is the person referred to in 9A? 9A talks about the person who has control. Remember, the individual who has control, that was 9A. The individual who has control over my company, if there is a common individual having control over both entity A and B. See, this is one situation which is not captured by 2/76. 2/76 talks about fellow subsidies. But in this case, do we say entity A and B are fellow subsidies? We would have said entity A and B are fellow subsidies only if the parent was a holding company. Here we don't have a parent, here we have a person. The individual is having control over both the companies. In 2/76, such an individual is not captured, I mean, such a situation is not captured by the meaning of fellow subsidies, the meaning of group entities, but 96 of India's 24 captures such entities as well. So common individual along with his close family relations is having control over both the entities, then the two entities are regarded as related parties in terms of 96. And then 97 talks about person identified in A1, that's once again individual, has significant influence over the entity or is a member of KMP of the entity. So in my company, the person is a director, and that person, the person in question, individual in question, is a member of my KMP, meaning my director. So my director has a significant influence over the other entity. Take an example. Let's say in entity B, an individual is a director. We are not looking at a shareholding. He is a director in company B. And that very individual has significant influence over entity A, then A and B are related parties. This is another case where whole lot of, Gharelu companies will come because somewhere or the other my directors will probably have significant influence over group companies. But see, I'm sure you can realize that every group has a list of related parties. Every group also has, is it possible to have a list of unrelated parties also? Every group has a list of related parties. Can I say every group also draws a list of unrelated parties? And I'm sure you'll all concur. I'm not expecting you to answer this question. That question doesn't need an answer, because I'm sure all of you understand what I'm trying to say, that it's impossible to draw a list of unrelated parties, because all we do basically is we draw a list of related parties, and those which are not related are unrelated. But between those two shades of a related party and unrelated parties, every business house also has another shady group, another shady list, grey list of entities which are actually related, but they're structured so as to be unrelated. I call them unrelated related parties. Unrelated related parties or related unrelated, whichever way you, it's a tongue twister, but whichever way you speak it, they're actually related parties. They actually are these related parties, but the way they're structured, they actually fall outside the purview of RP definition. We are so cleverly, endeavored, we have so cleverly structured the shareholding that somehow we are able to put it outside the RP definition, but properly seen, 97 will capture most of the so-called unrelated related parties will come under 97, because someday or the other, my director in question or my directors in question will have significant influence over all the so-called de facto group companies will be coming under the definition of 97 anyway. So the point we were trying to, that I think that would complete a discussion on 98 is a small issue. The entity or a member of group or is a part or provides KNP services to the reporting entity. My entity provides KNP services. India में ऐसा होता नहीं है, because in India we don't have managing agency system. An entity providing KNP services doesn't have, I mean, director services. That's what we refer to as managing agency system. That was scrapped long time back in India. So 98 is not possible. That cannot happen in India. But 97 is what is relevant. 98 is not relevant in Indian context. So the point I was making is that definition of 2 by 76 is very easy to escape. Definition of 9A and B of India's 24 will be far more difficult to escape. And therefore, if we are the compliance person, or I am the secretarial advisor or auditor of any company, what I should always try to see is, besides the list of so-called declare related parties, admitted related parties, I must try to probe into unrelated related parties. That is where the real risk is. I'm sure with a bit of reflection, all of you can realize that the real risk lies in the list of unrelated related parties. That's where the real risk is. Because if you've admittedly taken a party as RP, so वहाँ तो will anyway comply with the law. What is so great in complying with the law? Because you've treated these parties anyway as RPs. So now it's a sheer question of, a proper compliance officer complying with the law properly. वहाँ तक कोई problem नहीं. But the moment we talk about those parties which are really speaking RPs, but are structured as URPs, unrelated related parties, that's where the real issue is, because the party is actually related. But we are dealing as if the party is unrelated, and therefore we'll continue to deal with this party without any compliance with any of the safeguards of RPTs. अब ये क्वेश्चन आएगा कि हमको कैसे मालूम चलेगा वो लिस्ट? अब वो लिस्ट देखिए कॉन्फिडेंशियली तो सारी कंपनीज में रहती है, आपको बताते हैं नहीं बताते हैं, दैट्स अप टू देम. आप ओपनली हार्ट टू हार्ट बात कर लीजिए कि सर द रियल रिस्क आप वही है. आप जिसको अनरिलेटेड मान रहे हो सकता है अनरिलेटेड नहीं हो, आप मान के चल रहे अनरिलेटेड है. वी हैव सीन सेवरल internal issues with the managements of companies. For years they were believing that this party is unrelated. Suddenly a rival faction comes up and says ये तो आपका related party है, and you were doing business with them anyway without any safeguards. You might also find lots of SEBI orders these days. They get into each of these issues. Today we were seeing an order where SEBI has gone into accounting lapses also. So there are lots of probe by regulators which actually get into the so-called unrelated related party. So I would say very closely see the list of so-called unrelated related parties to see, but that's where the real compliance risk is. If our focus is on ensuring compliances so that everyone is safe, we are safe, the management is safe, everyone is safe, then the focus should be on so-called unrelated related parties to see if by some stretch of law, the so-called unrelated parties are actually not related. That's what we need to ensure. That's where the focus should be. So I have talked about what's the meaning of related party. We've talked about what's the transaction. That allows us to proceed now to see under what circumstances the transaction comes to audit committee. How does the audit committee see the transaction? But in the meantime, I've got some questions as well. The questions are: Concern says voice is breaking. I'm guessing it's fine now. Vijay Shirodi says, how can matter be referred to shareholders without board approval? Why it can? There is no reason why a matter cannot be put to shareholders without board approval. In listed companies as well, sometimes we put matter saying that board is not able to decide. Board does not want to decide. There's no, board does not have to recommend a matter to shareholders. Board can say that since the board does not, I don't have to go and say so many words that we are not wanting to decide, therefore we are putting it to you. But one of the reasons for taking shareholders approval is that either the board is divided or the board is not confident. Board is after all a fiduciary. If the fiduciary cannot decide on the matter, where does it go? It goes to beneficiaries. Shareholders are the ultimate owners of the company. They are the ones who are ultimately affected. If the board cannot decide, the matter goes to domain of shareholders. There is nothing wrong in putting a matter where the board either is unable to decide or the board is unhappy deciding. Definitely no issue at all. And I would also generally say that if I've got the shareholder sanction If I obtain shareholder sanction, I am absolutely confident and comfortable with the transaction. अब खाली देखना ही है कि shareholder sanction मतलब what? Does it mean super majority or simple majority? If the matter is in one of the matters, we actually insisted on super majority. Though the law is talking about Section 188 talks about simple majority, but we actually insisted on a super majority because we knew that the matter is one the related party interest is involved, and the management itself has, substantial voting right. So they will be able to put their weight on the matter and get the resolution passed. But that is the very reason why either the majority shareholder should not vote or the matter should be put for a super majority vote. But I'm talking about situations where even though the law requires an OR, there's nothing wrong in you seeking an SR because you know that the weight of the majority shareholders can actually make a lot of difference on the general body resolution. I've got some other questions. Raman Sapraji says, loan received from a director in compliance of regulation section 23 is done with declaration, etc. Since it's a related party transaction but is not covered by section 188, whether the approval of the board is required. Ramanji is saying the director has put a deposit with the company. This is in ordinary course of business if the company is taking deposits or taking loans and the terms of the loan are arm's length, I don't see the issue. But if the audit committee is not comfortable, let the audit committee put it to the board. The interested directors will refrain from voting. Other directors may vote on the matter. So I don't see this is a big issue on which we need to go as far as approaching shareholders. Super user. This is a question from super users. So good that we have super users in the room here. Super users. I'm very happy seeing super people, supermen, superwomen, superpowers. We have a super user who says, for unlisted company who is related party under section 2/76, who is a related party? If that definition is restricted compared to 2/76, 2/76 does not refer to, I think that's what I mentioned. So super user's question basically is that in case of unlisted companies, do we need to see Ind AS at all? I agree that we don't need to see Ind AS or AS at all for the purpose of RPT controls in case of unlisted companies will be confined by 2/76 and therefore we're looking at audit committee approval only. We are looking at audit committee or the board as the case may be. Poonam Singh ji says whether managerial remuneration is a related party transaction. Whether managerial remuneration, I would generalize the question and say whether appointment to an office or place of profit, to appointment to the office of, let's say, managing director or a president or a SMP or a KMP, are these related party transactions? So first of all, I would say I have no doubt that appointment of a managing director or appointment of a manager or appointment of a president or appointment of a say SMP or KMP, without doubt that's a transaction. Should it come under section 188 or should it come under section 177? Under 177, every RPT must come. I don't have a doubt on that. If you're transacting with a related party, the transaction must come under section 177. Should it come under section 188? You could see that the carve out under section 188 in case of appointment to an office or place of profit. In case of office or place of profit, the section itself says that if the remuneration to be paid to such appointee is what the appointee is entitled to get as a director. It's a question of full-time director and the appointee is simply getting what is entitled to get as a director, then the appointment does not count as office or place of profit. In other words, only in those cases where we are paying over and above what the employee will be entitled to get as a director, will it count as office or place of profit under section 188. So my answer would be 177 very surely required, 188 will be required only if you are paying over and above director's remuneration. Mostly that would not be the case, but that will be the case if you are appointing director's relative. For example, you are not appointing a person as a whole-time director. Let's say you are appointing a relative of a director as a president. Say you are appointing relative of a director as a consultant or as a president. So remuneration is getting is not remuneration as a director. Remuneration is not as a director. Therefore, that would be appointment to an office or place of profit, and therefore will be covered by 188 as well. Rajesh Chakraji says Section 177 enhances the scope of Section 188 and empowers the audit committee to cover a transaction which is itself not mentioned in Section 188. I have absolutely no doubt on that. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is Section 188 is limited to 7 transactions only. 177 says any related party transaction. So any related party transaction in Section 177 does not have to be read in the sense of Section 188. So even if a transaction is not covered by Section 188, if it's a transaction with a related party, it must come under Section 177 nevertheless. See, the whole purpose of the audit committee existing, purpose audit committee क्यों है? Audit committee का नाम audit committee है लेकिन वो audit नहीं करता है. Audit committee audit नहीं करता. कुछ लोग बोलते हैं audit committee auditor का appointment करता है. Auditor का appointment का एक business है. उसका main काम है balancing. It's a tool of balancing because there is a possibility of conflicts overriding the decisions of the larger board. So this committee, which is consisting mainly of independent directors, this committee is almost like it's performing a sort of an audit function, but it's auditing or vetting or checking the actions of directors. Directors के action को ये committee एक तरह से audit करेगी. इसका नाम मेरे formal auditing नहीं है, but transactions proposed by directors or proposed by management, if they at all involve a conflict of interest, they pass the muster of the audit committee first before they can go ahead. So that's therefore the fact that the item is not listed in Section 188 is not a good reason, not any reason at all as to why it should not come to audit committee. माने audit committee के सामने कोई मामला, माने all of you are compliance professionals, I would say. Therefore, if the question sometimes is, should I place it before the audit committee or not? अब answer आपका yes भी हो सकता है, ना भी हो सकता है, हाँ भी हो सकता है, ना भी हो सकता है. अगर question ये हो कि should I place it before the audit committee, मेरा suggestion हमेशा है इसका आंसर ना में मत दीजिए. Should I place or not? ये question क्या हुआ? अगर place करने में दिक्कत थोड़ी ना कोई. Audit committee थोड़ी कोई ROC है कि MC है. Audit committee आपका घर का आदमी है. तो audit committee के सामने place करने से कभी don't hesitate because audit committee is after all meant for this. So if you have potential of even a shade of a doubt, I would still say answer should be yes. Let's place it to audit committee. Another question from Kailash Jaiswalji. Whether financial transaction should come under Section 180, 177? My answer is certainly yes. As I mentioned, if it's a financial transaction with a related party, all transactions with related parties should come under Section 177, irrespective of whether they are captured by Section 188 or not. My colleague Niku says, will reduction of remuneration of directors come to audit committee as a modification of RPT? This might be common case in present scenario. But in present scenario, we are cutting down the remuneration of the directors. कर लीजिए क्या दिक्कत? Remuneration cut करने में कौन मना कर रहा है? Remuneration cut ही करना है तो मना थोड़ी करेंगे. Audit committee के सामने लाएंगे तो वो क्या बोलेगा? नहीं कर रहा है. So I'm thinking the question is whether to place it before the audit committee or not. Mostly I may not even want to engage in that exercise. मैंने इतना सारा दिमाग लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है. Audit committee के सामने लाएं कि नहीं लाएं, आपके दिमाग में शंका है तो प्लीज ले आइए. नहीं लाने का चिंता मत करिए. Ramit Chitkara ji says a director getting fee for professional services over his remuneration, will it be covered by place of profit? Say for instance the director is appointed as a consultant. Let's say the director is appointed as a consultant. So he's given remuneration as a consultant. That is a place of profit. Money one-time engagement as a I would normally say one-time you've taken for example some opinion and you're paying for that. That is not a place of, that's a single transaction. Of course, it's a transaction with a related party, therefore must come to audit committee. I would not call it a place of profit. But if you appointed director on a monthly, let's say, retainership fee, I think that's a question commonly from Ramit Chitkara ji. There's a similar question from Deepak Kukreja ji saying, will there be non-compliance of company act if the transaction of remuneration to a director is not approved by audit committee? I think I'll just reiterate what I said. I said if you're remunerating directors as directors, if you're remunerating directors as directors, that is not covered by section 188 because remuneration paid as a director does not cover the section 188. However, it is still a transaction in terms of section 177 and therefore should come, in my view, should come to audit committee. Suppose आपने कर दिया है, audit committee approval नहीं है, okay, audit committee approval नहीं है, तो मेरे ख्याल से it's not a huge issue according to me because अगर जरूरत पड़ती है तो audit committee notification ले लीजिए, पर नहीं किया अगर आपने notification ले लीजिए. So I would therefore say this, it's not a breach of Companies Act. It would, I would say section 177 says all RPT should come to audit committee. Like nahi laye to will the transaction get vitiated? Is the transaction a bad transaction? Get it ratified. I prefer to, I would try to, instead of keeping it completely unapproved, I would at least say take a ratification from the audit committee. So we'll move to now. Once we know what is transaction, what is related party, we'll move to what is the basis for the audit committee to approve or disapprove a transaction. So we are once again coming to approval by the audit committee. As we were saying earlier, the two considerations for audit committee are ordinary course of business and arm's length. How does audit committee approve transaction? Audit committee can approve transactions in several ways. First is the case of a de minimis transaction, a small value transaction. I think I mentioned it last time as well. Transactions up to a limit of rupees 1 crore. Each transaction being in a limit of rupees 1 crore is a small value transaction. Those transactions don't have to bother or engage the attention of the audit committee. Other than small value transactions, transactions could be recurring in nature or transactions could be non-recurring in nature. In case of recurring transactions, the transaction can be put under omnibus approval. Omnibus approval basically means what? Omnibus approval essentially means it's covered by generic approval, mostly given at the beginning of the year. But it's not saying omnibus can be given at the beginning of the year only. For example, let's say transaction limits get exceeded and therefore we need to raise the limits, we can always do it mid of the year also. Omnibus meaning we are not doing it transaction by transaction scrutiny, we are granting omnibus approval. अब ये question आता है कि on what basis does the audit committee grant an omnibus approval? When it comes to omnibus approval, what is the basis for the audit committee to grant omnibus approval? Merely because the company needs to do transaction on regular basis, can that be the basis? I mean, for example, in the month of April or May, whenever the first board meeting is said, I would say sale of goods to an associate company approved up to a limit of 500 crores. इतना बोलना काफी है क्या? But is the limit, the monetary limit, the only consideration, or is it more than that? Now, the way I would see it is, while approving transactions on omnibus basis, the consideration for the audit committee must exactly be the same as it would have been had the transaction come for a specific approval. Agar transaction specific approval ke liye aati, so what all things will the audit committee see? We said two things. Ordinary course of business, I think all regular ordinary course of business is not a big question. Whatever the company does ordinarily is ordinary course of business. So that is a very wide clause which captures almost all business transactions, excepting like one-off things like, let's say, purchase of a division, sale of a division, scrapping of a line of business, investment in subsidiary companies, disposal of subsidiary companies. Most of the things which the company regularly does is ordinary course of business, OCOB or OCB. But OCOB is not a stumbling block against transactions in most cases. However, the key term is arm's length. This is where most audit committees mostly fail to do the proper job that they expect, that's expected of them. What is arm's length? Arm's length transaction means what? Is it pricing of the transaction which makes it arm's length? or pricing alone which makes it arm's length, or is it transaction in holistic sense? Arm's length का मतलब क्या है? Is it pricing alone or is it more than pricing? I'll give an example. Let's say I have a related party. I mean, let's call it Gharilu Limited, Gharilu Private Limited. I am selling my regular product to my Gharilu Private Limited at a price of rupees 120 per unit. That's the selling price of the unit to my Gharilu company. And 120 per unit is also the price at which I sell it to unrelated parties. Market may be, when I go and sell in the market as well, my selling price is 120 per unit. And I'm selling at the same price to my Gharilu company. I'm sure all of you will probably say, it's a problem. 120 per unit is the price at which you sell in the market. 120 is the price at which you sell to Gharilu Private Limited. Now I'll point out several things. In the market, when I sell to my dealers, I have the following safeguards. Normally, I'll say credit period allowed to a dealer is only 2 months. 2 months credit period. That's part one. Part two. To a single party at any point of time, I don't take an exposure of more than 1 crore. I will not allow credit of more than 1 crore to a single party at any point of time. Third, I will say if the net worth of that dealer is, let's say, or the dealer must place a security deposit with me, I'll deal with the dealer only with the dealer placing security deposit with me. अगर 60 days के भीतर dealer ने payment नहीं किया तो I'll forfeit the security deposit. I'll take some other action. So in a sense, when I deal with unrelated parties, I have number one selection criteria, I have a security deposit requirement, I have a credit policy, I have a system. My SAP has an automated control under which I will stop the sales to a dealer if the outstanding goes for more than 60 days. I will stop the sales itself. वो auto triggered होता है. सबको पता है कि SAP पे auto triggers है. If the receiver has exceeded particular limit, it automatically stops for the sale. However, when it comes to my Gharilu company, I am not using either of the controls. All I have is the selling price. But credit period, receivables are outstanding for last 12 months. I have not recovered anything at all. So I have given enormous credit period to my Gharilu company. I have not bothered to recover at all. I have gone much beyond the normal, approved credit limit of rupees 1 crore per dealer. I don't have a security deposit block. In a sense, I don't have any of the safeguards that I use in case of unrelated parties. All I have is the price is the same, but none of the other features of a transaction are met by the so-called Gharilu company. Will it be a case of related party transaction? Will it be a case of arm's length transaction at all? I'm sure all of you will say no way at all. So pricing is not the only consideration for establishing a transaction to be arm's length. Or real practice में क्या होता है कि most of the audit committees, most of the compliance persons also, they will nicely go to an auditor because most of the particularly foreign owned companies will also have to get an arm's length pricing certificate. So they'll go to so-called ALP auditor. ALP auditor क्या करता है? He'll give an ALP confirmation that this transaction is priced at an arm's length price. अब ALP price लेके खुश हो जाते हैं. My auditor has given a certificate arm's length है. Auditor ने ये नहीं बोला कि बाकी terms, auditor बाकी terms देखे थे क्या? बाकी terms of the transaction will also need to be seen. We cannot treat a transaction as arm's length transaction without seeing the other terms of the transaction. I think this is where most of the merits of the audit committee also fail. Yesterday I was making a sort of caustic remark when I was saying that it's very interesting to see audit committee minutes where 20-25 transactions are listed, and at the end of 25 transactions we got a 2-line statement. The audit committee reviewed the transactions and found the same to be ordinary course and arm's length. 1-2 लाइन में सारा मामला खत्म. आर्म्स लेंथ है खत्म. कैसे आर्म्स लेंथ है? आपने क्या स्क्रूटनी किया? So I would very strongly suggest when it comes to establishing the transaction to be arm's length, we need to take several steps. Arm's length price किसको कहते हैं? Arm's length terms and arm's length price are two important things. arm's length price and arm's length terms. How do we know the price is arm's length? There might be lots of things where there is nothing like a market price. Market में है ही नहीं वो चीज, तो market price कहाँ से होगी? So for determining arm's length price, there are several considerations, and I'm sure you're all aware that there are rules of the OECD, and there are rules under Income Tax Act which talk about what is arm's length price. So there are considerations for arm's length pricing. For example, there will be a CUP, that is comparable uncontrolled price. There might be what you call net margin method. There might be transactional cost pricing method. There might be cost plus pricing method. There might be several. I'll come to a slide which talks about the arm's length pricing techniques. But the arm's length pricing techniques are well understood. The techniques are identified in the income tax. Which of the pricing techniques holds good in which transaction is a matter for the audit committee to see. For example, if the goods in question or services in question have a market, in that case the best way is CUP, comparable uncontrolled prices. That is, had it been uncontrolled pricing, what would have been the price? That's the most relevant pricing technique in case of those goods and services which have a market. If the goods and services in question do not have a market, in that case it could be net margin method. Meaning, are the provider of services and the acquirer of services, have they shared the profits in a reasonable proportion? Or maybe transactional, I said transactional net margin method, profit split method. Profit split method means we are splitting the profit between two of us in a reasonable proportion. Or maybe cost plus. So it might be several ways of pricing. Maybe one of the various ways of pricing may be applicable, but pricing is just one part of it. Next part, of course, will be, are the other terms of the transaction also arm's length? So we need to take a holistic view. Therefore, the audit committee, when it reports whether they'll come to a conclusion that the transaction is arm's length or not, they must first of all very surely say arm's length based on which pricing method for each and every transaction. If there are 20 transactions being approved, we must say arm's length based on which method. That's part one. Part two, they must also make a statement that other terms of the transaction also do not give a reflection that the transaction is not arm's length. The transaction must be arm's length both from a pricing perspective as also from other terms of the transaction as well. Otherwise, for the audit committee to take a view, I mean a simple one-liner that all the transactions were found arm's length will be completely, I mean, unbelievable. So I was talking about omnibus, and I was saying even in case of omnibus approvals, the safeguard was still the same. Meaning, we'll say by granting omnibus approval also, we'll use the same safeguards to say that even for transactions approved under omnibus route, transaction was ordinary course, transaction will be priced, because यहाँ पे pricing हुआ नहीं, transaction pricing होगा. यहाँ पे आप बोलेंगे transaction must be priced on arm's length basis, and of course we give an approval up to a limit, and we give an approval for a particular time frame as well. So limit in terms of amount, limit in terms of time, put a condition that each of the transactions must be done on arm's length basis, not just pricing but other terms of transaction as well. That is the way to grant an omnibus approval. So, and that also will be the way to grant approval for specific transactions. Transactional approval as well as omnibus approval must both follow the same yardstick, which is arm's length nature of the transaction. I have questions already here. So let me just go through the questions. I have a question from Ramesh, and if any of you actually want to speak, I mean, instead of writing a long chat sentence, if you want to actually speak up, just say that, because this is, I mean, at least one topic on which I would certainly welcome and expect more vocal participation as well. So in case you want to speak, I think it's easier to just say instead of typing a long chat sentence. Most welcome to speak as well. Tamil Chitkaraji says, ordinary course of business. I understand it's a core business activity. For example, a company in healthcare transacts a lease agreement with RP. Leasing is not core business. In my view, it should not be considered other ordinary course of business. Now, my submission will be as follows. Let's say I'm a healthcare company. As a part of healthcare business, what do I need to do? I probably run hospital. So let's say I'm running a hospital. तो हॉस्पिटल के लिए मेरे को मेडिकल इक्विपमेंट खरीदना पड़ता है. हॉस्पिटल के लिए मेरे को लीज पे प्रॉपर्टी भी लेनी होती है. हॉस्पिटल के लिए I have to buy supplies. I have to engage doctors. I have to probably engage, let's say, I have to contract with orthopedic in or whatever, pathological laboratories as well. So whatever I need to do, whatever are the activities required in healthcare business, everything which is required in healthcare business. I'm not saying merely running the hospital is ordinary course. I'm saying everything which is required for being in healthcare business, all of it will be ordinary course of business. So all the activities which ordinarily healthcare entity does as a part of its business, not just the core activity, purchase, sale, renting, leasing, etc. Everything which is, as long as it's ordinary course of, as long as, for example, we are leasing in a hospital. Now, if I start leasing out a hospital, that is not ordinary course of business. Ordinarily, I'm not leasing out property, but I'm leasing in a space for, say, running a hospital. That's definitely ordinary course of business. Deepak Kukrejali says, whatever you're saying about arm's length is it's law, but whereas in practice, a second auditor, the client only shows us the minutes of the audit committee and certificate from auditors and management declaration, not to the other parameter you have discussed, which is precisely why I had to stress the point. Deepak ji, completely agree with you. And I have my colleagues here also, are also secretarial auditors. Some of them are national level awardees as well. I guess I'm hoping that she's not, I think she's there still. National award winner secretarial auditors also are there in the room. And the point I was making was that if as secretarial auditor, all I'm shown is a certificate that the transaction is priced at arm's length. So in that case, I will need to make a recommendation to the board. This is not something on which I can qualify. I would not want to qualify on this. However, I would like to put a strong recommendation to management that please do improve your minuting. Please do say that not only was the transaction found to be arm's length priced, other terms of transaction were also arm's length. Because if other terms are not arm's length, it would not be possible for me to call it arm's length transaction. I mean, I gave an example of the Gherilu company. If the pricing is 100 rupees or 120 rupees, but the credit allowed in normal course is 2 months, to my Gherilu company I allow a 12-month credit, then the 120 rupees pricing loses its meaning altogether. I cannot call the transaction arm's length at all. So yes, while I agree with you that companies only focus on arm's length pricing, but it is for us to go and make this recommendation that it's important for you to improve your scrutiny of related party transactions and also to improve the quality of minuting. The minutes also must say the same thing. If the audit committee is actually discussing the entire transaction at length, but the minutes are a two-liner minute, that is also a problem because minutes must be reflecting what the audit committee has done. Please do appreciate that in time to come, independent directors will have to actually face a lot of questions from regulators, particularly if things don't go well. But as long as there is no problem anywhere, we are in good times, probably no one will question. But the moment we step into bad times, like the world is seemingly, slipping now, and let's say the company undergoes a corporate scandal. So in all those past corporate scandals, do you think the independent directors will not be put to question? Talk about any of this, I don't need to name companies, you all understand the companies. In every such case, independent directors have been put to question कि आप क्या कर रहे थे? आप सो रहे थे मीटिंग में? तो आपने खाली लिख दिया आर्म्स लेंथ, लेकिन आर्म्स लेंथ था नहीं. Loan was given to a LAP loan against property was given to a builder with no project being there at all. आपने बोला arms length, लेकिन project था ही नहीं वहाँ पे, and loan was happily given. So what were you doing? So they will face tough questions, and IDs will face quite likely face prosecution if they have not been vigilant on the other aspects of the transaction. Deepak Kukraja ji also has a question: will there be non-compliance? No, I think this is something we will discuss already. Let me move on. PK Ojha ji has a question: whether pledge of securities by director or his relative to secure a borrowing by the company will be treated as related party transaction. Yeah, let me just phrase the question. The question is: the company has taken a loan, and the security has been placed by a director. So what is happening is here I am the beneficiary as a company. I am the beneficiary of a pledge. Director has given a pledge of securities to secure a borrowing by me. So as far as I am concerned, what's happening? I am taking a loan. I am taking a loan from whom? I am taking a loan from unrelated party. A related party has chipped in to secure that borrowing by me. Am I getting the benefit of the security? Probably in a matter of speaking, yes, but I would only say that the loan has been enabled by a security placed by director. I am not passing any benefit to the director in question. So I don't have a transaction with the director. I have a transaction with the lender. And therefore, in my view, based on the facts that you have stated, based on the fact that you have stated here, by itself, it does not seem like a related party transaction. My colleague says also discuss on how listed company failed to take approval of audit committee for CSR contribution when routed through related parties. She is wanting me to say that listed or unlisted, this is probably the same in case of listed or unlisted companies, but more so in case of listed companies. CSR activities are typically carried out through group foundation. There's a group foundation through which all money is pooled, and the money is pooled by the listed companies. The money is transferred to a group trust or group foundation. That's where the utilization, from there the utilization happens. So as far as the listed company is concerned, what are we doing? We are contributing the money to a foundation. Is the foundation related party? Question उठता है, is the foundation or trust a related party? If I browse through the definition of section 2/76, I will not find a trust anywhere at all. A trust will nowhere be covered by 2/76. But if I go by Index 24, as I said, the word used there is entity, irrespective of nature of entity. Very likely the trust, the Gharilu Foundation, will also be covered by related party definition because it's under significant influence of the person or persons who is controlling my company. So if the trust in question is a related party, then routing of contribution through the trust is also a related party transaction. And therefore, in my view, the audit committee's intervention is required. It's not just CSR committee, but the audit committee also which has to come in to say that this is, the reason for the transaction being routed through the Gharilu Foundation should be captured as a part of the audit committee's discussion. And Deepak ji also has a further question: whether transaction of giving corporate guarantee to a bank in respect of a loan taken by subsidiary will come before the audit committee. Good question. The company wants to give a loan. The company wants to give a guarantee to a bank in respect of a loan taken by a subsidiary. So what am I doing? I am actually giving a guarantee in respect of a loan taken by subsidiary. First question will be section 185. 185 का answer, subsidy is exempted from 185. So your answer is that वहाँ पे exemption है. Therefore, forget about 185. Now 188 के लिए 177, 188 में नहीं आता. Giving of guarantee does not come under section 188. 177 में I am giving a guarantee. So this is a question of transfer of obligations. We said three things: transfer of resources, transfer of obligations, and provision or acquisition of a service. This is surely a case of transfer of obligations. Obligation getting shifted to me. So it's a case of a transaction. I'm taking the obligation of my subsidiary company. Am I getting paid for it? Probably not. So the question will first be, is it something which the company should be doing in ordinary course of business? Is it ordinary course of business of the company to give guarantees? if you're talking from perspective of a listed company, I would suggest that listed companies should have, they are required to have a related party policy. RP, all listed companies have a related party policy. In the so-called related party policy, it would be appropriate to define, because that's what the policy is needed for. This is a side remark I would make, that people draft out policy draft करते वक्त people do what? दो चार जगह जाते हैं, पॉलिसी उठाते हैं, कट पेस्ट करते हैं, पॉलिसी तैयार होते होते 15 मिनट लगती है, इधर से कट पेस्ट किया, उधर से कट पेस्ट किया, पॉलिसी रेडी। पॉलिसी में थोड़ा सा दिमाग लगाना पड़ता है, थोड़ा सा क्या काफी दिमाग लगाना पड़ता है, because there are lots of things you can achieve through the policy. So in my submission, my related party policy should say what is ordinary course of business for me and what is arm's length pricing for me. If my ordinary course of business, or what transactions will be excluded from the purview of related party, controls. For example, one of the transactions I would like to say as ordinary course of business for me is transactions where the beneficiary is a subsidiary. Giving of guarantee for a subsidy is certainly not ordinary course of business if you see on the face of it. But why do I say it's an ordinary course of business? Because if I'm enabling the borrowing by my subsidy is ordinary course of activity for them. For my subsidiary, borrowing of money is definitely ordinary course of activity for ordinary course of business activity for it. And what am I doing? I'm actually facilitating that borrowing. So as long as I'm facilitating something which is ordinary course of business for my subsidiary, then my activity of enabling or facilitating also becomes ordinary course of business. This is so if my related party policy puts it explicitly, and I would recommend that that's how it should be. So first question is the giving of guarantee ordinary course of business? But that depends on your RP policy. Next question, are we being paid for doing it? Are we getting compensation for this? So I would normally recommend that there should be a compensation for any guarantee. It should actually be compensated. You should actually be paid a guarantee commission. How much should the commission be? If I were to talk in parlance of Ind AS 109, Ind AS 109, I could actually say the guarantee should be so priced, the guarantee commission should be so priced that the fair value of the guarantee on the date of extending the guarantee becomes zero. I made a bit deliberately complicated statement. I've been saying that मैं जानबूझ के कुछ complicated statement देता हूँ, तो आपको लगे कि कितना complication आप खुद नहीं कर पाएंगे, मेरे पास आएंगे. So once again, the point was, I was saying, the guarantee commission will be so priced that the fair value of the guarantee on the date of extending the guarantee becomes zero. What the meaning of, putting in simple words, the guarantee should be priced such that I am recovering the expected loss, potential expected loss by way of the guarantee by charging guarantee. Guarantee commission is a consideration for that potential loss that I might suffer if the guarantee actually gets triggered. That's the meaning of guarantee commission. So the guarantee commission should be priced taking into consideration the probability of a default by the subsidiary, and in that case, how much will be the burden on me. That's how the guarantee should be priced. So if the guarantee is priced on arm's length basis, the guarantee is an ordinary course of business transaction. In that case, I would say I have satisfied the requirements of both 188, 177 and regulation 23. So in short, my long answer to this question was, I talked a lot about this question, but to put it briefly, I would say I am not advocating that any guarantee to any company can be given without any guarantee commission. Randomly giving guarantees without commission, to my mind, is not doing justice to requirements of corporate governance. We should charge appropriate guarantee commission. There might be a GST angle there also. You would probably say, sir, GST lag jayega. GST benefit लगेगा तो सामने वाला उसका सेट ऑफ लेगा. But there should be an appropriate commission for the guarantee, and the guarantee should also be priced so as to be arm's length pricing. My colleague also says, Deepu says, discuss approvals required by both the companies irrespective of who is taking the burden and who is taking the benefit in case of RPDs. For example, in case of ICD, both the company which is receiving loan will take up. What she's trying to say is that if I am the borrower, then also approval, but in case of arm's length transaction, मेरे को arm's length से ज़्यादा मिल रहा है, arm's length से कम मिल रहा है, then there is an issue. Arm's length से ज़्यादा मिल रहा है तो भी issue है, because arm's length means I must exactly be getting what is fair. I must not be getting more than fair, and I must not be getting less than fair. That's the whole concept of arm's length. Right. So I believe we so far talked about the approval by the audit committee. We'll now move on to see what is the perspective for the board to approve. As we mentioned earlier, the approval by board of directors will not be required if the transaction is meeting both the tests of being ordinary course and arm's length. Ordinary course भी है, arm's length भी है, दोनों condition meet हो गया. In that case, we do not need to go to the board at all. Board approval is not required at all if both the conditions are met. Either of the conditions are not met, in that case, the transaction has to go to board in terms of section 188. Now, I must, if it goes to the board in terms of section 188, then will the interested directors still vote? Will the interested directors vote if the transaction is going to the board in terms of section 188? Now, once again, the answer would be because of section 184 and because of the rules under section 188, interested directors shall not participate because they have a concern or interest in the matter. That would mean the transaction will have to be approved by disinterested directors. Board approval is not a big issue because if you are able to pass the test of the audit committee approval, then the approval by the board becomes easy. Though as I was once again mentioning, if admittedly our view is that the transaction is not arm's length, I would find it tough for the board also to approve. Now we move to the next stage. What if the transaction requires shareholder approval? In what circumstances or in what cases will the transaction require shareholders approval? Now here there are, once again, listed companies, unlisted companies. In case of unlisted companies, the requirement may come because of the materiality thresholds of section 188. Transaction is not meeting the test of ordinary course and arm's length, therefore it's coming to the board. Board shall not approve the transaction if the transaction is crossing the materiality thresholds. What are the materiality thresholds under section 188? So the thresholds are, if the, let me share the presentation here once again. So we talked about the audit committee approval already. Maybe I think we can move further. Yeah, let's come to this. If the transaction is covered in section 188, transaction is not meeting either of the two, ordinary course of business or arm's length, in that case, the transaction will require board approval. And the transaction will go to shareholders approval if the transaction is a material RPT. Material RPT here means what? In context of unlisted companies, if the value exceeds the limits as laid in Rule 15, and the transaction is not meeting ordinary course of business and arm's length test, it's exceeding the limits as listed in Rule 15. As you might recollect, in Rule 15 recently, absolute limits have been dropped. So now we have relative limits only. Earlier the limit was dealing with 100 crore, 50 crore, so crore, this kind of limit. Those limits have now been dropped. Now we have relative limits only. For example, 10% of net worth, 10% of turnover, etc. So if the limits of Rule 15 are crossed, in that case, the transaction has to go to shareholders approval as well. In case of listed companies, what is the rule there? The approval of shareholders is required even in case of ordinary course of business transactions as well. Even if the transaction is ordinary course of business or arm's length, even there, the approval from shareholders will be required except in case of transactions with wholly owned subsidiaries. And there the requirement for approval comes if the transaction is crossing the limit of 10% of consolidated turnover. Transactions with a single related party throughout a financial year is crossing the limit of 10% of consolidated turnover as in the last financial year. In that case, the transaction will go for shareholder approval. Sounds a little complicated thing to say, but let me just try taking a small numerical illustration to illustrate the point. Let's suppose my CFS turnover, my consolidated turnover of last financial year was rupees 4,000 crores. The turnover reported in CFS statements of last financial year, was rupees 4,000 crores. So let's first zero down on what is the limit. 10% of CFS turnover, 4,000 crores ka 10% हुआ 400 crores. So I'm looking at a limit of rupees 400 crores. Now, what are the, and I identify a particular related party. Let's say particular related party in question is an associate of mine. I have an associate. For everyone, let's call it Associate Private Limited. APL, Associate Private Limited, is the company with which I have several transactions. मेरी company Associate Private Limited उसके साथ बहुत सारे transactions. During the year, I have lots of transactions. What all do I have? I am selling goods to them. उनको sell करता हूँ. Over a year, I have sold, let's say, goods of rupees 150 crores to them. I have sold goods of rupees 150 crores to the company called Associate Private Limited. 150 crores का sale. I also have given a loan to Associate Private Limited. I have given a loan as well. Okay. Let me just put the. So I have the following transactions. I have sale of goods, sales, rupees 150 crores. I have given a loan. Let's say the amount outstanding at any point of time for the loan was rupees 100 crores and the interest is rupees whatever 10 crores. Interest charge during this 10 crores. I've also given a guarantee in respect of loans taken by this very Associate Private Limited. I give a guarantee as well. Guarantee in respect of loans. Guarantees for an amount of rupees 200 crores. Okay. And a guarantee fee, guarantee commission charge. I'm charging a commission, guarantee commission charge in rupees 5 crores. I'm charging 2.5%. I'm charging 5 crores. Right. I also have whatever. I think what else? Let's say I also purchase goods from them. I also purchase goods from them. Same company I purchase goods as well. I purchase goods of let's say rupees 100 crores during the year. So these are transactions I have with the company called Associate Private Limited. My question was the limit that we are observing is rupees 400 crores. Now, I said all transactions with a related party in a financial year, if they cross the limit of 10% of CFS turnover, in that case we'll say we cross the limits of materiality and then we'll have to go to shareholders. How do we capture the transactions here? I'll talk about sales of this. I think simple things to capture will be this part. Sale of rupees 100 crores, very simple to, I mean, this one is very simple. Sale of rupees 100 crores, very, very easy to see. This part, sales of 100 crores, बहुत easy है. Purchase is also easy. इन दोनों को जोड़ लेते हैं. 150 plus 100, that makes it 250. अब लोन के केस में क्या लेंगे? Loan amount of 100 crores लेंगे कि interest of 10 crores लेंगे? Similarly, guarantee के केस में क्या लेंगे? Guarantee commission लेंगे कि guaranteed amount लेंगे? So this is a very important question on which people have a lot of confusion. Now, my view is that in case of a loan, the transaction is the exposure. How much are you exposed to? Loan may be of a fluctuating amount. Maximum exposure at any point of time in the year कितना था? 100 crore था, so I'll take 100 crores. In case of a guarantee, also is the guaranteed commission by transaction or the guaranteed amount is by transaction? Here again, I would say the exposure, the shifting of obligation, that is the transaction. So transaction is not 5 crores that I'm charging. Transaction is the exposure of 200 crores that I have taken. So I would therefore count the guaranteed amount and the loan amount and the sales and the purchases. ये चारों को जोड़ते हैं, the value comes to 450 crores, which is obviously exceeding 10% of my CFS turnover. Therefore, this transaction will have to go to shareholders. This transaction must go to shareholders. Now, if this transaction goes to shareholders, how do I get it approved? Transaction goes to shareholders, how do I get it approved? Will I need a ordinary resolution or will I need a special resolution? First question is OR or SR? Is it OR or SR? I think no one has a doubt on that because both listing regulations and the Companies Act both say I need an OR. Answer is that I'll need an OR. But ये OR is not an ordinary OR. ये OR नहीं है. It's not an ordinary resolution. It's a case of a special ordinary resolution. SOR है. It's a special case of an ordinary special case. I will say it's a special case of an OR because therefore I'm saying it's an SOR.
So the voice is not coming. It's not coming.
I think I lost connection. Let me just give me 1 moment to come back.
minutes हमारा 15 लाइव છે
I'm trying to restore, so give me 1 moment. Just give me 1 moment to restore. I'm guessing you are able to hear me now. Are you all able to hear me now? So what happened is we lost connection. We got disconnected. Are you able to hear me now? At this point, can you? Yes, yeah, I think I'm getting yes. Yes, I guess you are able to hear me now. But what had happened was that since we got disconnected, I've lost the messages which you all had typed on the chat. So it seemed that I had lost messages. अभी 2 minutes पहले से जो message आपने दिए, whatever questions you might have put here, I've lost them all. So I've lost all the questions put so far. I mean, I've answered lots of questions, but whatever you mentioned over the last few minutes, I have lost them because the screen just went and got sort of disconnected. So yes, I will share the PPT. PPT will not be an issue at all. Sharing the PPT is not an issue. And I'm also being told by some people that the voice is still not clear. So maybe it's because of connectivity, but I was saying that I have lost the questions on the chat. So if you had a question which I have not answered so far, you might just have to repeat the question because I have lost it on the chat. I'll not be able to see the questions you're already posting. But let me go back and I'm saying, while capturing the limit of 10%, we will capture the maximum amount of exposure, we'll capture the amount of guarantee and the purchase and sale transactions. If that's exceeding 10%, the transaction will go to shareholders. I was saying this is a case of a special case of an ordinary resolution. Special case of OR meaning what? That in this case, though it will go for OR, but the related parties will refrain from voting. Related parties will not be allowed to vote. That would mean the transaction will have to be approved only by unrelated parties. That becomes a special case. So all related parties will refrain from voting and the transaction will be approved by unrelated parties, which is what the intent of the law is, that if independent shareholders have approved it, in that case we have no issue. But if the transaction is getting approved merely on the weight of voting rights of the related parties, then we surely have an issue, because that's the real case where conflict of interest actually matters. So that's the approval under Regulation 23 or under Section 188 also. Even if the transaction is going in terms of Section 188, there also, if it's going into Section 188 as well, there also related parties will have to refrain from voting. I'm getting a lot of feedback from participants that my voice is not coming clear. People are saying my voice is fluctuating. People are saying my voice is weak, voice is breaking. So I'm getting several of these feedbacks. There's nothing much I can do about it. So I will see if the connection, well, I don't know what I can probably do. Give me a moment to see if I can do something about it. If we reconnect, once again we'll lose whatever. I think it might also be that we might, I don't know, we may not lose the recording, but we might lose the chats. So you want me to reconnect? Do you want me to connect again? Okay, let me just try reconnecting. So I'll disconnect and connect again. Just give me a moment. Is this better? Is it better? Okay, so I've disconnected and reconnected, and I'm hoping that it's okay. We'll have another 10 to 15 minutes of discussion. So I'm hoping it's okay. There's nothing else I could have. Yeah, but I'll come to the questions. Deepak ji, I've got your questions already. It's there in the chat. Let me just come back on that. So let me just continue on that. So I'm saying Regulation 23 or Section 188. If the transaction goes for shareholders approval, that becomes a special case of OR, because the related parties will have to refrain from voting. That's the very principle of Section 188. Now, the other part that we wanted to discuss, that's a very important part, is that Regulation 23 may soon go for an amendment. Regulation 23 may shortly go for an amendment. What is that amendment going to be? There is a working group, there is a SEBI working group which has given the report, and therefore the report is in public domain. Of course, it's not still, it's still not implemented, but it may be implemented well, and therefore let's take a sneak view on what are the likely changes. So the proposed or likely changes under LODR regulations likely to come from SEBI. We don't know as of now, there's still proposals, but likely to come. What are the changes? The changes are as follows. So first, the meaning of the word RP is getting expanded. Currently, the word RP is defined in accordance with accounting standards. Then the entity is forming part of promoter or promoter group, are taken in the RPT definition. I think I'm still getting the same feedback. That's very difficult to understand what I'm saying because of maybe the connectivity. Voice is cracking, voice is difficult to understand, voice is not reaching, etc. are the feedbacks I'm getting. I tried disconnecting and connecting again. So as I said, it's going to be maximum 10 minutes kind of discussion. Thereafter, I'll be taking questions. It's getting recorded shortly. It's to get some recording automatically. So if you think the recording will resolve the issue, well, we'll definitely have recording surely made available. Let me just, I tried disconnecting and reconnecting, so I possibly cannot, do anything more than that. So I said I would just want to give a quick view of SEBI's forthcoming changes in related party transactions. In the meaning of the word related party, irrespective of what is the shareholding of a related party, if a party is forming part of promoter or promoter group, it will still be a part of related party. Secondly, and that's very, very important, in the definition of RPTs, we will also be including transactions which are circular in nature. That would mean if the effect, intent and effect of a transaction, if the effect of a transaction is to give a benefit to a related party, irrespective of if there's a stopover in between, transaction is done with an unrelated party, but it circles back to a related party, even then the transaction will be considered as a related party transaction. This will be a very, very important change because very so we had lost once again. I've reconnected. Sorry about the disconnections. This is about the bandwidth issue on which I have no control absolutely. And I was saying, sometimes transactions are structured so as to be with unrelated parties, but they circle back to related parties. For example, say I sell goods to another unrelated party who in turn sells it back to related party. So once this working group report of SEBI is implemented, such circular transactions will also be captured in the definition of related party transaction. Thanks for all the technology advice. I've changed my net connection. I'm hoping it's okay. I'm sorry about the bandwidth issue, but I'm hoping it's fine. Oh, I'm told it's perfect now. Anyways, so I was just about to, on the closing side of our presentations, I was saying, SEBI is now saying that if the cause and effect of a transaction is to benefit a related party, it would still be taken as related party, and then approval of shareholders will be taken based, currently the limit is 10%, so the limit is being reduced to 5%, and then absolute monetary limit of 1,000 crores also. And also very, very importantly, when audit committees give an approval, the audit committee will have to give a complete justification in terms of what are the controls, what are the factors based on which the audit committee approves the transaction. So approval by audit committees must be based on whole lot of factors or factors which the audit committee takes into consideration while approving related party transaction. That's a change which is likely to come. So as and when the committee report is implemented, that's when these changes proposed by SEBI regulations take effect. I'm very sorry for the connection issues. We did not have these issues over the last 3 days, but the fourth day, that too towards the ending stretch, unfortunately we had the issues. So let's do what? At this stage, I'll park my discussion, but I'll be happy to take questions. We already have questions here. So I'll come to the questions that have been posted by some people. And in the meantime, people got further questions. Because I think related party transaction is a very important subject, very, very important, extremely confounding subject. So if you have any questions, let's tackle them. So Swapnil Kohli asked the question, under regulation 23, are you supposed to pass an OR or SR? We are supposed to pass an OR, order the resolution, right? But then the OR is a special type of an OR where related parties are not allowed to vote. So it's a special case of an OR. There are other questions already, which I said I have lost them because we disconnected and came again. So I'll request if you can maybe paste back your question if you want to ask the question verbally, because in short while from now, we may be closing a discussion. We'll be closing this 4 lecture series of Back to Basics. But if you are, if you want anything verbally, vocally at this stage, you definitely can. I have a question from Mr. Sanjay Podar saying you were about to discuss arms length pricing terms. I thought I had discussed that. Let me just once again reiterate. What I was saying was that arm's length, what is required for the purpose of section 188 regulation 23 is not arm's length pricing. What is required is arm's length terms. So transaction has to be arm's length from every perspective. Pricing, as also all the other terms of the transaction must be arm's length. And for pricing to be arm's length, there are several parameters. Some of these are very time-tested techniques of arm's length pricing, which are listed in income tax safe harbor rules also, as also in section 92 onwards of the Income Tax Act. And these are coming from OECD international arm's length pricing guidelines. So those techniques are well available. In case of transactions which have a market price, mostly the right method will be CUP, comparable uncontrolled pricing method. But otherwise, for other transactions, we can use other bases also. And I would reiterate the point that when audit committees approve transactions for arm's length purpose, they must say on what pricing method they approved it and what were the other terms of transaction based on which they founded arm's length. This is what I was meaning to say. Rajesh Chakraji says that we have an WhatsApp group on company law matters where you can discuss directly with me. Good question. Thank you very much. Rajesh, I think we'll probably have to think of this. D2 says discuss exceptions practically provided in the RPD policy. That's what I would, in between I mentioned that the RPD policy may put a proper definition of what is ordinary course of business or transactions which will not. Another thing is in the definition of RPD policy itself, you can say carve-outs. For example, managerial remuneration, contribution to PF, etc. They don't need to be approved by the audit committee at all. These will be taken as exceptions in the related party policy itself. More importantly, the related party policy may put definition of what is ordinary course of business and what is arm's length. Buddy says no related party shall approve such resolution whether entity is related party to a particular position. In regulation 23 as well as section 188, if the matter goes to general meeting all related parties will refrain from voting. There's absolutely no doubt on it. All related parties will have to refrain from voting. Let me see if there are further questions. Amber has a question. Can you throw some light on proper disclosure AOC2, especially terms and conditions of contracts, arrangements, etc.? How much of the terms and conditions should be disclosed there? The moment somebody asks me a question on AOC2, I am stumped. I don't know. I should first ask what is AOC2, what is AOC3. I am hoping if some of my colleagues can help on that. Any of my colleagues, you can. If I'll unmute you in case you say you'd like to speak and answer. I can unmute you. But as for me, if it's an enclosure to the board report, we're talking about an action to the board report. I think just the broad terms. I mean, terms of transaction may be just the broad terms. I don't know about detailing the terms of the transaction. But if any of my colleagues wants to, volunteer this question verbally, vocally, just say I'll unmute you. Any other question, anyone? Well, I think it seems that we have come to the end of our 4 lecture series on so-called back to basics. And personally, for me, it's been a very good utilization of time. It's been very enriching in terms of mutual learning. And I'm so happy to see that more than 60% are still in the room at this point of time. More than 60% are still there in the room, despite it's almost like going to be 7:10. And I must appreciate people from very senior people have come to join this work. So I think this is what makes it extremely, I would say, satisfying. We will be uploading the entire PPT. We'll be uploading the entire PPT, right? And that's part 1. And part 2, for people who have missed out on some of the lectures, like some people have joined from the 2nd or 3rd lecture, we have shared the recording of the previous lectures. Today's lecture was quite disturbed one, so we'll be uploading the record of today's lecture as well. So that if you missed out, I guess the recording may not be missing my speech. So I'm guessing that you'll still be able to see the records. I have the last question from Amit Chaurasi, who says RPD policy categorized material RPDs for Companies Act as if they exceed semi-LODR limit. Should I disclose the same as material RPD inform AOC2 but as to director's report? So I would once again express the same weakness, which is those questions on AOC just stumped me. So if I was wondering if any of my colleagues can handle that. My colleague Buddy also has another question. Commission paid to non-executive chairman who is a promoter will also attract provisions of Section 188. Since he is not getting remuneration as a director, it's a part of managerial remuneration still. So I guess this is definitely a transaction and therefore should come under Section 177. And well, in Regulation 23, it will not come if it's anyway not. It's not anyway going to be non-material. As regards the question on AOC, I'll just pass on to my colleague Neetu to answer that. Divya has preferential issue to a promoter on private placement basis. Under Section 177, issue of shares will also come. Issue of shares will also come under Section 177, but not under Section 188. So I'll pass on to my colleague either Neetu or Vinita to answer that question on Neetu. I think you can unmute yourself. Maybe you just unmute yourself and answer that. I'm guessing you can unmute yourself, can't you? I have unmuted you, so you can maybe say.
So regarding AOC2,
and Vinita, I'm receiving several complimenting messages here. Thanks messages. I'm very grateful to all complimenting messages. But Neetu, you can just speak on and answer that question about AOC2.
Yes. So regarding AOC2, which forms part of the board's report, there are two parts to it. One, wherein all related party transactions which are not at arm's length needs to be disclosed, irrespective of whether it is material or not. And the other part is,
Vinita, also I have unmuted you as well. So Vinita, to answer, I have unmuted you also.
so if Vinita is there, Vinita, you might answer this question.
Who does?
It's okay, Neetu, you can continue.
Vinita, I can speak on.
So AOC2, basically we, as Neetu was mentioning, we divide it in two parts. One is that all the transactions which are not on arm's length needs to be disclosed. And for arm's length transaction, only if it is material, that needs to be disclosed. Now materiality, of course, I take nexus
both
from...
of them are also not able to connect. Or... Another question from Anuj Kushwari saying, A is a director of XYZ, B is a relative of Mr. A, appointed as advisor in JED Limited, accordingly whether it's required to take shareholders approval. If it's office or place of profit, if it's somebody is appointed as a consultant or advisor, it would mostly be an office or place of profit. If the amount being paid is in excess of 2.5 lakh per month, monthly 2.5 lakhs, then this might be crossing the limit of materiality, and therefore might need to go to shareholders. If it's a small company, mostly getting shareholders approval will not be a problem. If it's a small company, it would mostly not be a problem. Okay. And okay, that the question about AOC still remains unanswered, so I'm sorry about that. I think my colleagues are also not able to reach out in terms of. So I think Vinita is not able to unmute, Sanjay. She's not able to unmute. I've tried unmuting. Probably she's not able to unmute either. I'll just try unmuting all for a minute. See, Vinita, can you answer it now? Very, very quickly. Or she was audible to you. Not audible to me. Anyways, that would mean I would have missed it. Achha, Vinita has answered it.
She has answered it, but I can just repeat it for all.
Maybe I can start.
So regarding AOC2, it's a part to be disclosed along in the board's report. There are two parts to it. One is wherein we disclose all the related party transactions which are not at arm's length. So in this part, all the related party transactions which are not at arm's length, irrespective of what the value is, what the amount is, needs to be disclosed. In the second part, only material RPTs are to be disclosed. Now here, what is material could be a question. So there are different practices that are being followed by the companies. Since this forms part of the Companies Act, therefore there are practices which say that the materiality is disclosed as per Rule 15 of MBP rules. There are also companies which take materiality from the LODR perspective and disclose transactions which are material as per LODR. So that is about AOC2.
Okay, so I think that's been wonderful, and thank you. It's been a great session with all of you. Thanks, and have a very, very nice time. Thanks.